Walk through an old castle, monastery, or centuries-old townhouse, and one detail immediately feels unusual. The staircase seems too narrow. The steps rise higher than expected. The turns feel tighter with every floor. At first, it looks like poor design, yet these staircases carried generations of people for hundreds of years, exactly as their builders intended. Why would skilled craftsmen create something that feels so uncomfortable today? The answer has surprisingly little to do with mistakes and everything to do with a very different world. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and let's climb back into architectural history. Long before steel towers reshaped city skylines, most buildings depended entirely on one simple feature to connect every floor. That feature was not a roof, a doorway, or even a window. It was the staircase. Without it, an upper level had little practical value because people, supplies, and building materials still had to move between floors every single day. Ancient builders understood this long before modern architecture existed. Whether constructing a stone fortress, a monastery, a merchant's home, or a royal palace, they knew that every staircase would influence the rest of the building. Its position affected room sizes, wall thickness, roof support, and even how people moved through the structure from sunrise until nightfall. For that reason, staircases were rarely treated as an afterthought. Builders often decided their location before laying out many interior spaces. Once the route between floors had been established, surrounding rooms could be arranged around it. Changing that decision later would require rebuilding large sections of the structure, something few projects could afford. Space always presented difficult choices. Every step occupied valuable floor area that could otherwise become a workshop, storage room, sleeping chamber, or living space. Wealthy estates sometimes accommodated broad staircases with generous landings, but ordinary buildings usually could not spare that luxury. Every additional foot of width meant sacrificing useful interior space somewhere else. Building materials created another limitation. Thick stone walls supported tremendous weight but left relatively little room inside smaller structures. Timber-framed buildings offered greater flexibility, yet long wooden staircases demanded strong beings capable of carrying constant loads without bending over time. Every design reflected the strengths and weaknesses of available materials rather than personal preference. Height also mattered. Reaching another floor required enough vertical distance for people to stand comfortably beneath ceilings while preserving structural stability above. Builders constantly balanced those competing needs, calculating how many steps could fit within the available space without weakening the surrounding framework. Construction followed careful planning instead of guesswork. Master builders marked elevations using measuring rods, plumb lines, chalk, and stretched cords. Simple tools guided surprisingly accurate layouts because consistency mattered more than speed. A single incorrect measurement near the bottom could create noticeable problems before the staircase reached its final landing. Different buildings demanded different solutions. Defensive towers favored compact staircases that occupied minimal space inside thick walls. Religious buildings welcomed larger numbers of visitors and often required broader circulation routes. Busy merchant houses balanced family life with commercial activity, encouraging layouts that kept movement efficient throughout the day. The staircase always reflected the purpose of the building surrounding it. By the time walls began rising above the foundation, the staircase already existed on drawings, measurements, and layout lines. It quietly determined how the entire structure would function long before anyone climbed the first finished step. Rehook, choosing the location, solved only the first challenge. Transforming rough stone and heavy timber into hundreds of durable steps required craftsmanship that modern machines now perform in a fraction of the time. A staircase could not simply be assembled from identical pieces. Long before factories produced standardized components, every step was made specifically for the building where it would remain for centuries. No two projects shared exactly the same dimensions because each structure presented its own height, width, available space, and structural demands. If you're enjoying this journey into forgotten building techniques, consider subscribing. There are many remarkable construction methods from the past that rarely appear in history books, and we'll continue uncovering them together. Work usually began far from the finished building. Stone staircases started inside quarries where experienced masons selected blocks with few natural cracks. Choosing the wrong stone could cause a step to split years later under constant use. Timber staircases demanded the same care. Carpenters searched for straight, mature trees whose grain could withstand thousands of footsteps without twisting or breaking. Raw materials reached the construction site by wagon, sled, or boat, depending on local geography. Once delivered, craftsmen marked every piece according to its exact position. Instead of producing interchangeable parts, they prepared components that belonged to one specific location within the staircase. Hand tools shaped every surface. Chisels, wooden mallets, adzes, saws, planes, and measuring squares slowly transformed rough materials into finished steps. Progress depended upon patience rather than speed. A mason removed thin layers of stone with controlled strikes, while a carpenter trimmed timber gradually until every joint fit tightly against the next. Accuracy came from constant checking. Builders measured each tread, compared neighboring pieces, and tested alignment before moving forward. Small corrections made early prevented larger problems after additional steps had already been installed. Nothing was left to chance because a mistake near the bottom affected every step above it. Lifting those heavy components presented another challenge. Without modern cranes, workers relied on timber lifting frames, rope systems, wooden rollers, inclined ramps, and coordinated teamwork. Each movement happened slowly, with experienced supervisors directing the effort from several positions at once. Careless handling could damage carefully finished stone or injure the crew. Assembly followed a deliberate sequence. Supporting walls or central cores had to reach the correct height before permanent steps could be secured in place. Builders installed one section, confirmed its stability, then continued upward. Every completed level created the foundation for the next, until the staircase finally connected one floor with another. Decoration arrived only after structural work had been completed. Wealthy patrons sometimes requested carved balusters, sculpted handrails, decorative newel posts, or finely detailed stone edges. Simpler buildings received fewer ornaments, yet the underlying craftsmanship remained equally important because beauty meant little if the staircase failed under everyday use. When the last step finally settled into position, visitors saw only a finished staircase. Hidden beneath that appearance stood weeks or sometimes months of careful measuring, shaping, lifting, fitting, and adjustment carried out entirely by skilled hands. Building the staircase demanded extraordinary craftsmanship. The unusual proportions that surprised modern visitors, however, were not accidents at all. They reflected deliberate choices shaped by the world those builders lived in. The moment most people climb an old staircase, they notice something feels different. The steps seem taller, the treads appear shorter, sharp turns arrive sooner than expected. Walking requires more attention than it does inside a modern office, hotel, or apartment building. That unfamiliar feeling often leads to the same question: did ancient builders simply get the measurements wrong? The evidence suggests otherwise. Builders designed staircases for the people, clothing, buildings, and daily routines of their own time, rather than for modern expectations. Comfort mattered, but it competed with many other priorities that no longer influence architecture in the same way. Available space was usually the first limitation. Thick masonry walls occupied a large portion of the building's footprint, leaving relatively little room for circulation. Instead of sacrificing valuable living or working space, craftsmen created steeper staircases that reached the next floor within a shorter distance. That decision saved space without weakening the structure itself. Building height also influenced the proportions. Many historic rooms featured lower ceilings than those found in modern public buildings, allowing staircases to rise efficiently between floors. Even when ceilings became taller inside churches or grand residences, designers often introduced landings or changes in direction instead of extending one long uninterrupted flight. Spiral staircases solved another practical problem. Towers rarely offered enough interior space for wide, straight stairs. Wrapping the steps around a central column created a compact route upward while preserving the strength of the surrounding walls. That arrangement also reduced the amount of material required during construction. Centuries of continuous use changed the appearance of many staircases as well. Stone gradually became smoother where thousands of footsteps followed the same path. Wooden treads developed shallow depressions near their centers. Rounded edges that seem intentional today often resulted from generations of ordinary movement rather than the original design. Handrails tell a similar story. Many appear lower than modern standards because historical building practices follow different proportions and local traditions. Restoration projects sometimes preserve those original dimensions to protect the building's historical character rather than altering every feature to match present-day regulations. Popular legends have added confusion over the years. One common claim suggests every castle's staircase was deliberately designed to disadvantage attackers during battle. While defensive towers occasionally considered military needs, historians have found no evidence that this explanation applies to every historic staircase. Practical concerns such as space, structure, available materials, and intended use usually played much larger roles. Modern building codes emphasize accessibility, predictable dimensions, and consistent movement for millions of users. Earlier craftsmen faced a different challenge. Their goal was to create a staircase that suited one specific building using the resources available at that particular place and time. The result feels unusual today, not because those builders lack skill, but because they solved problems that modern architecture rarely encounters anymore. The next time you climb an old staircase, look beyond the worn steps beneath your feet. Each one reflects centuries of planning, craftsmanship, and everyday life preserved inside stone and timber. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten building techniques, subscribe and join us for another journey into engineering history.